Okay, how he is again. It's great to have. You can probably hear that I got a bit of a sore throat. Like everybody seems to be sick this time of year. We got no frost this year. Not it didn't. Temperatures were mild, so it didn't kill off a lot of viruses. But it's just a cough. Really, it's not that bad. It's great to have this time again to make the videos because of the Christmas holiday season was wild. I probably had too much of a good time. But anyway, yes, this video is about the werewolf and as both a cryptid and an archetype. So this makes the werewolf, like the Loch Ness monster, very, very interesting. Now, first of all, the reason why I'm making this video is because of a werewolf cryptid 14 event that's taking place currently in the north of England, in Yorkshire, around the city of Hull. A resurrected archetype cryptid called Old Stinker has appeared back in the news with people having encountered him. Old Stinker is a 8 foot walking upright wolf with the face of a man, and he's called Old Stinker because he has very bad breath. Now, the wolf and the werewolf are interchangeable. For instance, you don't get werewolf stories in places where wolves don't exist in the present context. And this is important. Wolves are now populating and surviving and thriving in every single country in mainland Europe now. Even places where you wouldn't expect them to be, they've come back in vast numbers and settled and populated. In particular, I'm talking about places like Belgium, Holland, and Denmark. Smaller countries, even Luxembourg. Now, this is fantastic because it's a re-establishment with the pagan archetypal force of the wolf within the European soul. It's almost like indicative of, and it actually is indicative of the resurrection of paganism in Europe and the defeat of Christianity through reason and logic, not through their own self destruction with things like Vatican sex scandals and all the other stuff that come to light in recent years. Now, the only two countries in Europe where the wolf doesn't hasn't been returned to is Great Britain and Ireland. Obviously, because they're islands. The wolves have repopulated Europe because of the end of the Cold War. When the Cold War ended and the Iron Curtain, which was stopped, was shut down, a lot of fences were removed on the Polish border, Hungarian border, Romanian border, East German border. The wolves came streaming. There was already wolf populations in a lot of Europe, but they came streaming in at a phenomenal rate, following the old forest systems that go through the Bavarian Alps, through the Odenwald, and through the Hessian forest up around the north, around Mount Brock, and all places connected with mysticism, and also the Dolomite ranges, and all through places like there was corridors like the Tyrol on the Italian-Austrian border. So to the point now where the wolf is fully established in Europe again, in Western Europe. It never lost its status in Eastern Europe. Now, with this, you get the ghosts of the past coming up. Now, people in the past lived in fear of wolves, and quite rightly, because this is what like Little Red Riding Hood. That represents a story of a young girl on her period, going through a forest, and if you have wolves that haven't a pack of wolves that haven't been fed in a long time, they'll attack anything. Mostly they live off small mammals, rabbits, hares, hedgehogs, even things like that, like mice, rats, voles, squirrels. They live off the smaller stuff. They don't normally attack the big stuff unless they have to, if they're starving, and they have decimated entire villages in places like Siberia. But generally, they're not overtly hostile to humans. Like bears, they prefer just to be left alone, and they will only really attack if they're starving or provoked. And that's just instincts coming in. At the same time, the European had this fear of the wolf. It also had this respect of the wolf. Early Europeans became very aware of the concept of the wolf pack, that the wolves were a family, that they were very, like humans, they were very family orientated, that the pack was more than just a gang of roaming wild canines. It was actually a family structure. And this also impressed the early Europeans. And this is why it became a common animal used in shamanic, particularly in countries like Hungary, shamanic workings and operations. Now, as I said, the two countries that don't have werewolves are Britain and Ireland. Britain lost its werewolves a very, very long time ago, back in the Middle Ages. And wolves have not been on the landmass of Britain for a very, very long time. I'll talk about Ireland as a different story in a minute. But before, actually, I'll talk about Ireland first. Wolves in Ireland almost made it and probably did make it up until Victorian times living in the wild. The last wolves were killed in the 1700s, but there were reports in the mountain ranges down around County Waterford and Tipperary and Kilkenny and in Cork of wolf howlings for decades afterwards, though no wolf was ever found. And that was put down to people saying, oh, it's just imagination. Now, when when they tried to do the plantation of Ireland under Queen Elizabeth the First, they had terrible trouble getting planters to go to anywhere else other than Ulster, because Ulster, apart from Donegal, was wolf free, and the Ireland was actually known both to the English and to the Irish as Wolf Island, and there was a deep affinity. There are no stories here of wolves eating people, no, none of that kind of thing. The wolves were tolerated here almost. They were accepted just like they would accept squirrels or badgers or any other animal. There seemed to be no particular fear of them. And the extermination program began with the English. In fact, it was all the English lords who exterminated the wolves of Ireland. And a lot of this had to do is because during the plantation times, the Irish fled into the forest and were living with the wolves. And this is all used to say, well, the native Irish are savages and barbarians. They live alongside wolves and foxes and wild animals. And it was used to demean the Gaelic Irish. But the reality was that this is why the wolf lasted so much longer in Ireland. In Britain, the extermination of the wolves literally began with the Normans. The Normans had a tremendous fear of the wolves for some reason. And they went on a mass killing rampage that by the Middle Ages the wolves were all dead. And in Scotland, Wales, and England. So, of all the countries in Europe that has been the longest without wolves, that had wolves, is Britain. Now, in recent years, there's now been, and it's probably going to happen, a major uh, plan to bring wolves back to Scotland. And they're going to reintroduce Norwegian wolves into the Scottish Highlands. And there's also talk of bringing wolves back to the Donegal Highlands in Ireland, although the momentum here is not as strong as it is in Scotland and Britain to bring the wolves back. Now remember, Scotland is also very much in its independence process as well at this point. So that's like, it's an archetype that's appearing. Now, where this old stinker character is appearing is in the north of England, around Hull. That's Yorkshire on the North Sea coast on the eastern side of England, northeast England. Actually, if you drew a line from Manchester directly across, you come to Hull, because I know because I've taken the train back and forth a few times. And in around the moors, so it's like American Werewolf in London. Now, this is almost to me like a foreshadowing of a belief that the wolves are probably going to be reintroduced into Scotland, and then eventually they'll make their way down into England somehow, or they'll be deliberately introduced to the national parks around the Yorkshire moors, which are quite remote. Although there wouldn't be a lot for them to hunt, but I guess they'll figure something out. But so this, when I saw the story about the old stinker, the resurrection of the werewolf archetype in England, I immediately realized that that's what that was. Now, that's not to say, you see, this is the important thing, and I keep bringing this up. This is what makes my research different than everyone else. That I am fully aware of a psychological and or a psychedelic element to Fortean phenomena such as UFOs, cryptids, the strangeness of the moon, the strangeness of space travel, and mysterious creatures, as well as their existence. So, by saying that, I'm not saying they don't exist. I believe that people see werewolves, that they what they have done is resolved them into a kind of a telepathic form where they've taken, possibly or through their fears or underlying neuroses, they have generated or transformed something like an ultra terrestrial, as the great John Keel called them. The ultra terrestrial manifests or transforms itself into a werewolf as a result of underlying psychological things. Now, that does not mean that the werewolf is no less real, or the UFO is no less real, or the Loch Ness Monster is no less real. It makes them actually extra real because the human mind has actually brought them into formation. But they have to be associated with something. They're like an echo. They have to be associated with an echo in the subconscious mind and in the psyche. So Loch Ness Monster, Alistair Crowley, Abermellon. UFOs, fears of social changes. Werewolves, neuroses regarding the reintroduction of the wolf into Britain, possibly travelling. Now, this is interesting as well. Hull is a major port connecting to the Low Countries, and in particular Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Now, a big deal was made of the fact that the Netherlands, Holland, had its wolves come back. That was the last country that anyone expected wolves to come back to. What's the next place across the sea? Hull. So you would have the archetypal form picked up in Holland by people from England travelling back and forth to Hull. And it's just like in Dracula, where the spirit, I'm going to talk about another video about vampires, where the spirit of Dracula arrives in England before his coffin ends up at Whitby Abbey. And where's Whitby Abbey again? Yorkshire. So, the same area. That's what makes Yorkshire a very special and magical place. If you ever go to England, go visit the back roads of Yorkshire. It's incredibly deep and ancient place, of a very powerful culture. But Old Stinker is an archetype regarding the resurrection of wolf consciousness, both in as present as it's happened in mainland Europe, and the potentiality of the resurrection of the wolf in mainland Britain. And I guarantee you, when it happens, when they start to get serious about bringing wolves back to Ireland, just as they're talking serious about bringing them back to Britain right now, you will have something like that develop in Ireland, and that's what will happen. Now, it's it's powerful, it's beautiful, but remember you see a lot of you people, UFO people, get angry at me when I say, oh, it's a jinn, or it's an ultra terrestrial, oh, it's a projection of the mind, as if I'm taking away something magical from you. I got news for you, my friends. I'm giving you back something that's even more magical. How mundane and average is a space alien coming to visit Earth like a flying saucer Christopher Columbus? How average and mundane is that compared to the idea that the human mind, that the human psyche can actually function in such a way that it can generate foreshadows of future changes or undercurrents of neuroses and social issues within the manifestation of paranormal activity and fully formed entities, be they UFOs, Loch Ness monsters, or indeed, in this case, Old Stinker, the werewolf. Fascinating stuff. Thank you for being on this channel. More of this kind of thing to come. And this is where my heart really is, along with megaliths. And yeah, this. We're living in, as the Chinese say, interesting times. And when you see the world in these archetypal eyes, you realize that everything is an archetype, and people you've met in your life, they're returning archetypes and shifting archetypes. But there's everything. It's very powerful. It's almost like a second sight. You're able to see not only and live within the present reality, but you become aware of the underlying mechanics, how they function, and how they can be altered by thought processes and will. And that, my friends, is basically the operating software behind chaos magic. Thank you.